I think in 2026, it's going to be critical for brands to have these three things working together. First is system integration. Second is creative consolidation. And then third is distribution expansion.
This episode of the e-commerce playbook is brought to you by TaxCloud. A new year is a good reminder to ask whether the tools you're using are still the right fit, especially when it comes to sales tax. As Shopify brands grow, sales tax can be hard to manage without the right support. TaxCloud works seamlessly alongside Shopify Tax to handle registrations, filings, and compliance directly with the states, giving you confidence that it's done right. If sales tax is something you're rethinking this year, learn more at taxcloud.com/thread. Hey folks, welcome to the e-commerce playbook podcast. I'm your host, Richard Gaffin, Director of Digital Product Strategy here at Common Thread Collective. And joining me for the very first podcast of this brand new year, 2026, is Mr. Luke Austin, who's our VP of e-commerce strategy here at CTC. Luke, what's going on? Happy New Year. How was your break?
Oh, the break was great. Good time with family. Had, three variations of whatever virus made it circle around and creates new versions of itself within subsets of young children. So, but we're back into a normal 5-day week, and it feels getting off the other side of the past few weeks. So energized, excited for it. Routine is my happy place.
There you go. Nice. Yeah. The routine definitely gets more and more attractive as you get older. That's what I've learned. At a certain point, it's too much break and you got to get back to it. But all right. Well, so what we're going to talk about then is getting back to it, essentially, right? Which is what is a year ago. Maybe I'll set up this context. A year ago, essentially this week, we had this very same discussion about what is it that brands need to do in 2025 to win. And a lot of that was around product diversification, volume and frequency of product drops, just kind of like creating net new things. This year, it's a little bit different. We have three kind of specific things that we want to talk through. In answer to this question, what do brands need to do, or the brands that are going to win in 2026? What are sort of the three things that they're going to be focusing on? And so Luke's been thinking about this a lot in terms of kind of vis-a-vis our clients. And we wanted to share some of those insights with you as we get into this brand new year here. So Luke, why don't you set up kind of maybe broad strokes, like kind of what brought you to some of these conclusions that we're going to get into in a second here.
Yeah, I think there's so many different ways we could have this conversation, but the three things that we are oriented around based on what we've seen over the course of 2025, and particularly the recent few months and coming out of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the conversations that we're having with all the brands that we partner with heading into 26, there's really three things that are connected that we're seeing as being essential for setting up for success into 2026 and having as really like the building blocks and foundation and focus area narratives for brands. And so I'll say them here and then we'll go kind of one by one and we can chat through. But I think in 2026, it's going to be critical for brands to have these three things working together. First is system integration. Second is creative consolidation. And then third is distribution expansion. And so for each of these, I'll kind of tease out one by one and then we'll dive in. But system integration, I thought about calling this like measurement cohesion as well. But what I mean by system integration is, I'll give an example, sort of a heuristic of what we're going through at CTC, even in terms of our systems, is going into this new year, there's so much work that gets done around the forecast and the projections and looking out into the future. And we are constantly looking for ways that we can more quickly get the signal that we need to be able to make the decision and get to action, right? And the more time that we spend in this, like trying to understand the truth of what's happening and what the problem is to be solved, is less time spent actually solving the problem and the action. And that so much of our conversations with our partners happen around this idea of the systems not being integrated that they're operating within, the team members, the platform, the tools being disconnected, disjointed. And so we're going to spend 3 hours talking about what's actually happening and what we're going to trust and what's the signal we're going to use, rather than agreeing on the framework, surfacing the right signal that gives us the highest quality data point, and then being able to spend the most time producing action against that. So system integration, creative consolidation. What I mean by that is we've just seen really clearly in our data that one creative format in particular it just performs leaps and bounds higher than others and justifies investment into it at a much higher level than others. And so I think brands that will win will focus more and more on resourcing their time and output against this creative format as much as possible. And then third, distribution expansion. So then once you have this, you have an integrated system, you have creative consultant, sort of the best performing format. Then what you're looking for is how can I get the most distribution possible against this really dialed in system and measurement framework, and then consolidated creative through more ad channels. So I have this creative format, and how do I get that distributed, not just on Meta, but on YouTube Shorts and AppLove? And how do I then expand distribution against more products? What is the next product or category subset that I need to think about amplifying within my catalog, and then retail channels as well? So we're on .com and now we're thinking about Amazon, or we're on Amazon already, and Walmart and Target. And so ways that we can take the existing set of products and creative units and amplify those in distribution expansion. So system integration, creative consolidation or creative focus, and then distribution expansion.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it seems like I'm trying to think maybe of like a way we can categorize these three things, or like a common theme here. I mean, it sounds like it's a little bit of a mix of focusing in order to expand, or something along those lines. It feels like what we're looking at is the next step for many of our clients, the next step for many brands in e-com to expand to the next level is to be able to get their systems dialed in enough to begin that expansion process, which we've talked about in the past in various kind of contexts. The idea that in some ways, sometimes it's unwise to expand too quickly, obviously. Yes. We talk about that in terms of platform, but also in terms of distribution. But what we're looking at here is that that's become necessary for a lot of brands, and these are kind of the two tools that you need to get there. So anyway, that's sort of my ramble about that. What do you see as kind of the overall trend line here? Like, why these three things this year?
Yeah. So I think that's right. And even along channel expansion, like we have at different times had different messaging as it relates to channel expansion, and the whole sort of idea that like get to $100 million on Meta and Google first before expanding elsewhere, right? And I think there's merit to that, and every brand sort of has to assess where they're at in the degradation curve on each of the platforms, and their team structure, their resourcing, et cetera, to be able to make this work. But the core idea is like, if you don't have clarity on a decision making and measurement framework, then stop there first, right? Like this is sort of a like step 1, 2, 3. Like, don't do the distribution expansion before you get your system integrated, because otherwise you don't know what's happening. And then don't do the distribution expansion into net new platforms before you have a system for creating the best performing creative format type that exists. Then, it's like sort of like do each of these things and then move on to the next after you accomplish the prior step. And so I think going into this year, what we are seeing in terms of what we're building for our service is the most integrated system possible to allow brands to do more of the net new things in these areas. And so what we're seeing through the development of the tools and technology and team incorporation of AI within our service is that it's possible to do a lot more in a much more integrated and consolidated system than ever before, which allows you to then expand into these new areas even earlier than was possible previously.
Yeah. So unpack for us then a little bit about what that looks like. I mean, it could be an example of ways you've seen this done well in the past, or since it sounds like part of what we're doing is sort of developing a solution for this, like what do you think like the practicals are of this sort of measurement system integration piece? Here's the thing. Every minute spent worrying about sales tax is a minute that could have been spent on your customers, your product, your brand, and growing your business. That's why so many Shopify brands work with TaxCloud. They take the complexity out of sales tax by handling registrations, filings, and compliance directly with the states. No complex setup, no waiting days for support, just a trusted partner who gets it right and gives you time back to focus on what really matters. Get back to running your business. Visit taxcloud.com/thread. That's taxcloud.com/thread.
Yeah. So the system integration, the core workflow that we've been sort of teasing this idea in different ways, and we'll have some more messaging around it, specifically of this idea of a profit engineer and this consolidated workflow.
Mhm.
And what that system integration looks like is the workflow of these four things: forecasting down to measurement, media measurement, then to creative output and analysis, then to meta media buying. So those sort of four levels of system integration that for any direct consumer e-commerce business, the workflow between those things is there's just so much overlap. So forecasting, what is the expectation for revenue and spend and contribution margin this month, and then new customer revenue, and what's my AMER target, right? So forecasting. Then measurement is how much budget should I allocate between each of my ad channels based on that total spend amount, and then based on the efficiency expectation, the contribution margin, the AMER, what should my ROAS targets be? So those are like just so directly connected. And then creative output, how much creative do I need, and against what marketing moments and what products to be able to accomplish the goal. And that connects directly to the spend that I need to accomplish on each of my platforms, right? And so, and then meta media buying, what is the ad spend target for Meta, and what is the efficiency I need to accomplish that at, and then all the creative that I need to deploy in the platform, which is really going to be the target that you're setting, the structure of the account, and the creative are going to be really the main impact areas, less so than the sort of tactical approach to the platform that are necessary. And so what we've seen is that related to each of these four things: forecasting, target setting, media measurement, creative strategy and output, and then meta media buying, though that is the like not having a defined or integrated system for those four things makes it really challenging to operate effectively for DTC brands, because there's so much connection and overlap between those things that it invariably becomes like this: okay, we're pacing off of our revenue forecast for this month. What's the issue? Well, what customer cohorts are coming from? Okay, what platform is coming from? Do we need more creative output as a result? Well, we don't really know the incrementality read. So like, should we look at this MTA platform to sort of assess it? And like, there's just like all four of those things, when they live outside of each other in different platforms and different team members, lead to being able to uncover what the insight is to produce an action, makes it really challenging to do that. And so what we're building and focused on is the most integrated, consolidated, and cost-effective version of that system that covers forecasting, media measurement, creative strategy, and meta buying, to be able to reduce the amount of time from insight to action as much as possible. And so brands going into this year, I think, will need to, the pressure as a result of the environment that we are in, the competitive landscape, the marginal profile, rising costs, et cetera, it just necessitates that brands are able to create, get to action sooner than later, right? And spend less time around like, which platform you're going to look at, 7-person Zoom meeting for 2 hours, sort of looking at this MTA tool versus this Google Sheet. We don't have time for that, because it's not producing incremental action. We need an agreed upon framework and system to be able to identify these opportunity areas.
Right. No, that makes sense. I mean, it seems kind of what you're talking about is the development of an actual single source of truth, because that's something that people talk about a lot. But of course, one of the issues is there are many sources of truth and many sort of kind of players on the board or whatever with their own sources of truth. And the idea behind this is to, in fact, consolidate, like you're saying, all of them into one, so that the conversation about what needs to be done next is like 4 minutes long, right? And then the rest of the conversation, the rest of the behavior is just action against that.
Yes.
Against that goal.
Yeah. And you need clarity into like what's happening and why. And that needs to be, to be able to get to clarity, it's difficult. You need your revenue, you need revenue data, you need new and returning customer cohort level data, you need cost level data, product costs and operating costs, you need marketing and measurement level data. So like each of these things is really challenging to get to, right? But yeah, so you need clarity to understand what's happening. Then you need accountability. You actually need to be able to say like, okay, here's the person that is responsible for then fixing that problem or delivering that outcome. And when it's a disparate group of 7 different people that sort of own like 1/7 of the thing, you don't have accountability either, right? So that needs to be consolidated. And then capacity, like the person that's responsible actually has to be able to solve a problem as well, right? Like they need to be able to have the tools and the experience and the knowledge available to them to actually be able to solve the problem. And so, yeah, a system that covers these areas of the forecasting, target setting process, measurement, to creative and media, and then being able to have clarity, accountability, capacity around these things, I think is really critical, because the brands that we see winning are just able to, within, like, do the thing that a lot of brands, it takes multiple days of Zoom calls and Slacks and email chains and
Mhm.
back and forth to be able to do it in 10 minutes. Be like, yeah, this is our issue. This is the thing to solve. Okay, let's go
Mhm.
spend the next 3 hours solving that problem for the people responsible, versus 3 hours uncovering what the thing is to be solved, and not a high level of confidence that's actually the thing, because we had to sort of build the system and the framework for uncovering the opportunity in the midst of the.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, it seems like basically the idea is to eliminate short-term decision making, essentially, so that you can free yourself up to maybe just in the long term, right? So if you're not, particularly on the leadership side, you're not spending 3 days going back and forth in Slack with juniors, essentially, like trying to figure out what to do the next day.
Yes.
Your job, which is ostensibly to be able to decide what you're going to do in the next 6 months, the next 2 years, the next 5 years, you're
Yes.
freed up to do that kind of thing instead.
Yes.
Um,
Exactly.
so let's jump into our second point here and see if there's anything we can tease out there. I mean, on the surface, it's fairly straightforward. UGC is the winner, but in terms of like how this actually comes about, this creative
Yeah.
consolidation, what does it look like in terms of, you know, and I know, I think we talked about this and maybe talked about it with Taylor, but it's like, does this mean no more stills? Does this mean no more, whatever, cinemagraphs or whatever it was we were doing 5 years ago? Is it just all UGC, or like what's the actual sort of like logistics?
Yeah. So, a couple of data points that are leading us and sort of surfacing this insight. This is looking over the past couple months, and more specifically around Black Friday, Cyber Monday, in that shorter time period. But what we saw across our data set is pretty similar year-over-year growth in terms of spend against static and videos, like almost equal. But the efficiency of video on Meta held constant year over year, actually slightly increased, whereas the efficiency of static dropped more substantially. And so we're seeing that video relative to static can hold efficiency at higher scales. Like the degradation curve of efficiency is like less steep on video generally. And then connected to that is that the UGC, an individual UGC ad is nearly 2 times more likely to become a high
Hmm.
spend winner than a standard ad. So this is like what we define as
Right.
an ad that reaches a level of scale based on the spend threshold necessary for that specific brand. So a UGC ad is 2 times more likely to be able to get to that level and get to that output. And so what we've seen overall is like, yes, creative output, higher amounts of creative output are necessary, and that'll continue to be the case. But I think there's this every brand has a different disposition towards this idea, which is like, okay, well, we should do like UGC video, lo-fi UGC video should be like, yeah, for every one of those, we create 10 sort of static iterative images. Like, let's have a balanced toolkit in that way, right? Other brands like eh, orient the majority of their ads towards lo-fi UGC video, and like really low towards the branded things. And what I would say is, I think it'll be helpful for more brands than not to take the approach of, we're just going to go, we're for every branded iterative ad that we make, we should make the same amount of UGC, lo-fi UGC video, and do some lo-fi UGC static as well in there. Like, may as well have it in the mix. But starting off the year from a dispositional standpoint and to get the team sort of in this rhythm, I think will be helpful for brands of like, we are just going to increase the output of this ad type because we see the ability for it to scale and produce a higher output, just much more worth it. But it's going to be a muscle. Like, you're going to need to find the team members, the
Mhm.
resourcing, the vendors. Like, it's going to be a muscle that needs to be worked to be able to get to that level. But I think brands who go hard on that idea in the first couple months out of the year will then just build this into their rhythm,
Mhm.
and have a better chance at winning the rest of the year with these assets that, like, it takes time to find, and they don't all work for sure. But I think this approach will be helpful for brands to be able to find that, because then what it does is it not only helps like your meta ad spend and accomplishing that goal, but it'll set you up to be able to take those assets and just distribute them in other ad channels as well, which we'll get to, and you'll have a larger library to pull from.
Yeah. So again, almost like the first one, it's about setting up structure
Yes.
to allow yourself to win for the rest of the year. Because again, yeah, sourcing creators is a thing that takes time. It's a relationship that you need to build. And so build it as soon as you possibly can. Quick, this is sort of a stray thought. Is there any brand or brand category that you've seen where this is not the case? Where like UGC is not like 2x better than the other types of creative?
There are brands who have cracked the like meme style lo-fi still creative really well, which I think is another like because what this is getting at is like find a completely different creative format type that's platform native. That's like that looks like it's socially native to the platform and ramp up the production of that. So I think lo-fi UGC video and then meme style still creative. Like those would be the two. But any account that like I'm trying to think. It's hard to think of any account that's performing really well and seeing growth that doesn't have one of those two as a big piece of what's driving the ad spend and the account.
Yeah. That makes sense fundamentally. Okay, cool. Let's jump to our third then, which is talking about distribution expansion. So with some cohesion consolidation comes the ability to expand. So talk a little bit about what this looks like, or maybe more importantly, like why is this necessary? Why now?
Yeah. So so a couple data points here as well. AppLovin is the channel that we saw. AppLovin landed a third share of wallet over Black Friday, Cyber Monday, that Cyber Week time period. So Meta, Google, then AppLovin. And so AppLovin is something we're focused on a lot in terms of finding additional distribution. We're seeing YouTube and particularly YouTube Shorts grow in terms of its contribution and share of wallet and the performance and at really high levels of incrementality relative to what the platform's reporting. And so it complements sort of like you have this really good lo-fi UGC video and launching that on AppLovin and YouTube Shorts is just a way to amplify the distribution of that asset. And so I think the channel distribution into those two areas is an opportunity for most brands heading into the year. And again, if you have a system that has a defined measurement framework where you're launching AppLovin in a geo holdout test structure, so in just a subset of geos, which means you need less spin to be able to get to stat sig on the performance, or YouTube Short, same thing, is you have a measurement framework and you have an incrementality solution that allows you to do that, then amplifying on these additional channels, you have an agreed upon framework for assessing it that already exists that doesn't require like something outside of your system. And you have creative that works on that platform where like now the amount of resource and time and analysis that's like that it's going to take away. At other times, it may have been challenging to justify that versus just like, okay, just more creative into Meta and like grow that engine.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have those two pieces in place, then it makes the lift in terms of the expansion and distribution much less. So platforms is one, and then the other area would be into products as well. So if you have a system, again, that can help you identify which products and categories are being underserved in your sort of in your catalog relative to others, then it can service for you. Like these are the other products, the other categories that we're going to launch and lean into more meaningfully, and then having the creative output against those. So additional ad distribution on new channels, additional products and categories that you're going to layer on to sort of the core things that are already working, and then expansion into additional retail channels as well. So I think Amazon, and then from Amazon into Walmart and Target, and finding ways to expand the distribution into these additional areas. And again, I think the integrated system is core to all of this because as you know, there's interplay on these channels of the halo impact of your D2C spend on Amazon and how much it's incremental versus sort of just taking away from your D2C existing revenue, where if you have the measurement framework and the tools that exist there, then you're able to measure these things and you're able to understand what's working and why. That makes the distribution and adding more complexity into the system something that can act assessed effectively.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I think like part of what the advice that we've given in the past around not jumping the gun on expansion has to do with the fact that when you expand into a new channel, you have to think about measurement in a new way. All of a sudden, you have to think about incrementality in a new way. All of a sudden, you have to sort of learn a new system every time that you expand,
Yes.
with to varying degrees. But what we're talking about is like if you have these first two pieces in place, along with this sort of the general sort of forecasting to media buying kind of communication system that you're talking about, all of a sudden expansion to these new categories, the actual like barrier to entry becomes much lower because you have systems in place to make sure to do that for you, I guess. Okay, does that make sense? Anything else that you want to hit? Like, give me your like sort of general thoughts on 2026. Obviously, I talked with Taylor at the end of the year, and his was generally AI is going to just take over everything, and we'll all have to sit in pods. What's your take on what 2026 is going to look like?
Yeah, well, I think sort of at the heart of this too, even in the system integration consolidation, is like it's every week we're discovering ways in which our individual capacities can and should be amplified as a result of technology enabling that to happen. And so I think like this forecasting, measurement, creative, managing the meta media buying sort of workflow, living in a system comprised of multiple tools and technologies and multiple team members, just like the bar is just being raised so quickly in terms of what a person is able to accomplish more effectively enabled by the technology that's just gonna perpetuate. And so now what I think that where we see the sort of beta and the value existing is like this idea of creating completely net new moments that grow the brand, that change the trajectory of the brand, right? These are thoughtful collaborations with other businesses and product launches into net new categories that, right, like the creating the net new marketing moments and doing that in a way that's thoughtful and incremental is the more challenging problem to solve and the thing that needs to get more and more time towards it, because as we're able to sort of like solve for the management of the business on a day-to-day basis more effectively, efficiently, in a lower cost way, and it requires less people and can be more system based, what that's going to allow is more brands to spend more time doing these things that create net new marketing moments, these launches that change the trajectory of the business and are the more challenging problems to solve. And that is what the necessity is going to be for brands, which is how can I focus more and more time and create more of these moments to change the trajectory of the business. And how do I have a system for managing the business on a day-to-day basis that allows me as the leadership, owner, operator of the business to be able to focus more of the time, more of the resourcing, more of the rhythm on that output versus the like, what should we adjust the budget on this campaign today activity. And that's being empowered by the technology, allowing sort of this like the predictability and the management of the business on a day-to-day basis, like if that to be done at a really high level. And if that isn't the case for businesses, like that's the thing that we're doing. We're sitting in that space where we're providing predictable profit for businesses is what we're focused on. And if you don't have a system that allows you to predict what the outcome of your brand is going to be over every single month and over the course of this year within a range of a few percentile points against what your forecast is, like that's a problem. Like you're spending too much time in that area that makes it really challenging to focus on the bigger swing things because you don't even have predictability of what next week's going to look like.
Yeah.
So that needs to be solved for. That's what we're building around to be able to enable the businesses that we work with to focus on those areas. And I think what it's going to do in 2026 is just going to create a wider distribution of outcomes in the market. We're just going to see we've already started to see this over 2025 where brands will come in and like we can sort of like guess before we get their data into stat lists, like, okay, how do we think this brand is doing relative to their category? And like just sort of general thing, like year over year revenue, contribution margin, like, okay, we're betting that they've kept contribution margin flat because they've been disciplined on cost, but their revenue is down probably 20% year over year based on the category, and they've had to pull back spend to be able to keep their contribution margin flat. Oh yeah, that's there. So like we've seen that more and more, but then we've been surprised more and more in recent months too, where these brands go in and we're like, they're absolutely crushing it because, and so I think that's what it's going to do is the distribution of what's possible is just going to get wider and wider. We're going to see more and more brands really struggling. We're seeing more and more brands really crushing it, and because of the amount of energy and resource that they're able to invest into these different activities and rhythms on a day-to-day basis. So I think it'll be exciting. It just opens up the aperture of what's possible. But the businesses that don't have that sort of that
Yeah.
stability in terms of that foundation, like it's going to make it challenging to be able to keep up with the brands that are able to index more and more resource into those big swing moments because they just have the day-to-day handled.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's like the potential has grown, but the difficulty level has increased as well. I think
Yes.
that's like pretty clear, just generally speaking, but also for 2026 for ecom. Like I think we can boil this down to big ideas and big thinking, big picture strategy, marketing calendar, that sort of thing has become incredibly important upcoming. And you need to make sure you have the things that you need in place to facilitate that, or you're going to have a problem. And so if that's something that you want to do with us as we build these sort of exciting things that create crystal clarity so that you can make these sort of big picture decisions, you know where to find us, commonthreadco.com. Smash that hire us button if you're a brand in the 8-9 figure range. We'd love to chat with you more. Luke, any final thoughts for us?
Get predictable.
Get predictable. That's right. We've been saying it for years, but now, boy, it really matters, folks. So, all right. Well, Luke, appreciate it. Appreciate having you here. And to everyone else out there, Happy New Year. Happy 2026. Let's go get them. And we'll see you next time. Take care.